Farmer enters the barn and freezes upon seeing girl healing his injured horse. Then, Robert Mitchell Thompson walked toward the barn with a heart heavy with worry. The day before, his champion horse Thunder had been seriously injured during a storm, and the vet wouldn't arrive until late afternoon. But when he opened the wooden barn door, his legs trembled, and he was left speechless. There, kneeling beside Thunder, was a young brunette woman in her early 20s, carefully applying a homemade salve to the animal's wounded hoof. She whispered soft, sweet words, just like his late wife Elizabeth used to do. "Easy now, my beauty. This will pass. You'll see," the girl murmured, her skilled hands moving in a way Robert faintly recognized from somewhere deep in his memory. The farmer approached slowly, trying not to make a sound. The horse, which had refused to let anyone near its injury the night before, was now completely calm, almost asleep under the stranger's care. "Who are you?" Robert finally managed to ask, his voice rough with surprise. The girl turned quickly, her green eyes wide with alarm. For a moment, Robert felt as if he were seeing a ghost. Those eyes, they were identical to Elizabeth's. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to startle you," she said, standing up quickly and wiping her hands on an old rag. "I heard the cries of pain during the night and I couldn't just stand by." "How did you get in here?" Robert asked, still trying to process what he was seeing. "The back door was open. I saw the horse was suffering and..." She hesitated, glancing at Thunder. "My grandmother taught me that when an animal is in pain, we can't ignore it." Robert looked at Thunder's hoof. The swelling had visibly gone down and the horse seemed much more at ease. "What kind of salve is that?" he asked, stepping closer. "It's my grandmother's recipe. She made it with field herbs, olive oil, and..." The girl trailed off as if she'd said too much. "And what?" Robert pressed. "A few drops of whiskey to clean it well," she finished, lowering her gaze. Robert's heart nearly stopped. That was the exact recipe Elizabeth had used. She'd learned it from her mother, who'd learned it from her grandmother. It was a family secret few people knew. "What was your grandmother's name?" he asked, his voice unsteady. "Margaret Hayward Johnson," the girl replied, and it was like lightning had struck Robert. That was Elizabeth's mother's maiden name, the woman who had disappeared from the family's life when Elizabeth was still a teenager after a terrible fight over land and inheritance. "Impossible," Robert murmured, leaning against the barn wall. "Did you know my grandmother?" the girl asked, her eyes bright with hope. Robert couldn't answer, his gaze fixed on the girl's neck where an old Virgin Mary medal hung. It was identical to the one Elizabeth had worn every day, the same one buried with her 5 years ago. "Where did you get that medal?" he asked, pointing. The girl instinctively touched her neck, shielding the medal. "It was my mother's. She said it was a gift from her older sister," she said softly. "A sister she lost a long time ago." Robert's world collapsed. Elizabeth had a younger sister, a sister she had protected, who had disappeared along with their mother after the family feud. Elizabeth had never spoken of them again, and Robert had respected her silence, thinking it was too painful for her. "What's your name?" he managed to ask. "Jennifer. Jennifer Johnson," she answered. "And you?" "Robert Mitchell Thompson," he said, watching for any reaction. Jennifer's eyes widened. "Mitchell, Are you Robert, the one who was married to Elizabeth?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You knew my wife?" Robert asked, though he already knew the answer. Jennifer began to cry. "She was my aunt. My mother talked about her every day. She said she had an older sister she loved dearly, but the family split up, and they never saw each other again." Robert felt his legs weaken. He sat on a nearby wooden bench, trying to process everything. "Your mother, what was her name?" "Sarah Johnson. She passed away 3 months ago." Jennifer wiped her tears. "Her last wish was for me to find her sister. But when I arrived in town, I discovered Aunt Elizabeth had..." "5 years ago," Robert finished, his voice choked. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening only to Thunder's calm breathing. "How did you know where to find me?" Robert asked. "I didn't. I arrived in town yesterday, asked about Elizabeth Mitchell and was told she had passed but that her husband still lived on the ranch. I spent the night in an abandoned warehouse nearby." She pointed to the neighboring property. "When I heard the whinnying, I came to see what was happening." "You've been sleeping outside." Robert stood up, alarmed. "Don't worry, Mr. Robert. I've been through worse." Jennifer tried to smile. "What matters is I found the place where my aunt was happy." Robert looked at the young woman, so much like Elizabeth. The same way of speaking, the same gentle gestures with the animals, the same sad smile in her eyes. "You're staying at my house," he said firmly. "Elizabeth would never forgive me if I let her niece sleep in a warehouse." "I can't accept that, Mr. Robert. I'm a stranger." "You're no stranger," Robert interrupted. "You're family." The sound of an approaching car made them both look outside. It was the veterinarian doctor, William Anderson, a man in his 60s who had cared for the region's animals for decades. "Robert, how's Thunder doing?" Dr. Anderson entered the barn and stopped when he saw Jennifer. "And who's this young lady?" "This is Jennifer, Elizabeth's niece," Robert said, still getting used to the words. "And Thunder's doing much better." Dr. Anderson approached the horse and examined its hoof. His eyes widened in surprise. "What treatment did you use? The swelling has gone down drastically and the wound is clean." He looked at Jennifer. "Did you do this?" "I used my grandmother's remedy," Jennifer replied shyly. "May I ask what remedy?" Dr. Anderson continued examining. "In 40 years of practice, I've rarely seen such a quick recovery." Jennifer glanced at Robert, as if asking for permission. He nodded. "Field herbs mashed with olive oil and a few drops of whiskey," she explained. Dr. Anderson stopped what he was doing and looked straight at her. "That remedy, where did you say you learned it?" "From my grandmother, Margaret Hayward Johnson." The veterinarian paled. "Wait, Margaret Hayward, Elizabeth's mother?" "You knew my grandmother?" Jennifer asked, her eyes shining. "I did. She was one of the best animal healers I've ever seen. When I was young and just starting out, I learned so much from her." Dr. Anderson smiled nostalgically. "But she disappeared from the area over 20 years ago." "She left with my mother after a family fight," Jennifer explained. "And your mother was—" "Sarah Johnson, Aunt Elizabeth's younger sister." Dr. Anderson looked at Robert with disbelief. "Robert, did you know Elizabeth had a sister?" "I knew she existed, but she never wanted to talk about it." "I respected her decision," Robert replied, the pain of loss still fresh in his voice. "My wife, Dorothy, was Elizabeth's best friend," Dr. Williams said thoughtfully. "Maybe she knows something. Would you like to come over for dinner tonight? Dorothy will be so surprised to meet you, Jennifer." "I'm not sure if it's appropriate," Jennifer began. "Of course it is," Robert interrupted. "You should meet the people who loved your aunt." A few hours later, Robert and Jennifer were at Dr. William and Dorothy's simple but welcoming home. The woman, a grey-haired lady with a warm smile, nearly fainted when she saw Jennifer. "Oh, my heavens!" she exclaimed, covering her mouth with her hands. "You look just like Elizabeth when she was young." "Dorothy, this is Jennifer, Elizabeth's niece," Robert explained. "Niece?" Dorothy stepped closer, studying the young woman's face. "Sarah's daughter." "You knew my mother?" Jennifer asked, her voice trembling. "I did, my dear. I was friends with both sisters when we were young." Dorothy hugged her. "How is your mother?" "She passed 3 months ago," Jennifer said softly. Dorothy closed her eyes, making the sign of the cross. "May God rest her soul. She was such a sweet girl." She held Jennifer's hands. "And you're here all alone?" "I came looking for Aunt Elizabeth, but—" "I understand." Dorothy glanced at Robert with sympathy. "And now, what do you plan to do?" "I don't know," Jennifer admitted. "I just wanted to see the place where my aunt was happy, to understand a little of the story my mother never really told." "What story?" Robert asked. Dorothy and William exchanged looks. "Robert, do you really not know why Elizabeth and her family grew apart?" Dorothy asked gently. "She said it was about land and inheritance, but she never gave details." "It was about you," Dorothy said softly. "About me?" Robert stood up, confused. When Elizabeth fell in love with you, Sarah's family didn't approve. They thought you were too young, that you didn't have enough money to take care of her, Dorothy explained. Their mother, Margaret, made Elizabeth choose her family or you. And she chose me, Robert murmured, beginning to understand. She chose love, Dorothy corrected, but she suffered greatly for it. For years she tried to reconcile with her family. She sent letters, tried to reach out, but they were too hurt. That's why she never spoke about it, Robert said, guilt weighing on him. She carried that pain alone to protect me. My mother suffered too, Jennifer spoke up. She loved Aunt Elizabeth dearly, but she was so young when the fight happened. She didn't fully understand, and by the time she grew up it was too late. She didn't know how to reconnect with her sister. They loved each other, but pride got in the way, Dorothy sighed. How many times I tried to convince Elizabeth to take the first step. And my mother thought the same. She said maybe Aunt Elizabeth didn't want anything to do with the family that rejected her. Jennifer wiped away a tear. Robert felt a heavy weight in his chest. His happiness had cost the separation of two sisters who loved each other. I should have pushed her harder to talk about it, he murmured. No, Robert, Dorothy touched his arm. Elizabeth was stubborn. Once she decided not to speak about something, nothing in the world could change her mind. But now you've found each other, William said, trying to ease the pain of the moment. That's what matters. Over dinner, Dorothy shared stories about Elizabeth and Sarah as children, how inseparable they were, how Sarah always copied everything her older sister did, how they cared for the animals on their family ranch together. Sarah had the same gift as Elizabeth for healing injured animals, Dorothy recalled. And from what I saw today with Thunder, you've inherited that gift, Jennifer. My grandmother always said it was a blessing passed down from mother to daughter in our family, Jennifer explained. She taught my mother, who taught me. Elizabeth also had that knowledge, Robert said. She took care of all the animals on our ranch. I've never seen anything like it. That's why you two met this way, Dorothy smiled. Fate wanted you to save Robert's horse, using the same skills your aunt had. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. When they returned to the ranch, it was already night. Robert prepared the guest room for Jennifer, the same room Elizabeth had used as a workshop for her embroidery. Your aunt did embroidery? Jennifer asked, looking at the framed pieces hanging on the wall. She made the most beautiful embroidery in the region, Robert said with a sad smile. She said she learned it from her mother. Jennifer walked up to an embroidery depicting a flower-filled field with horses grazing. My mother used to make similar ones, she murmured, but she never wanted to teach me. She said embroidery was a thing of the past. Maybe because it reminded her too much of her sister, Robert suggested. Maybe, Jennifer agreed, running her fingers gently over the fabric. You can stay here as long as you want, Robert said. This house has always belonged to the family and you are family. Thank you, Uncle Robert, she said, the first time she had called him that, and the words moved them both. The next morning, Robert woke to the sound of someone singing in the barn. It was a song Elizabeth used to hum, a folk tune she said she'd learned from her mother. He went to the window and saw Jennifer brushing Thunder, singing the same melody he hadn't heard in 5 years. The horse was fully recovered, playful and prancing with joy. When he went down to the barn, Jennifer was preparing a different ointment. What's that for? He asked. For the mare in the corner. I noticed she has some skin irritation. Jennifer pointed to Star, an older mare who had recently developed an allergy. How did you notice? Robert was impressed. It's the way she behaves. She keeps scratching one spot, and the skin is a little red, Jennifer explained. My grandmother taught me to watch for the signs. Robert watched Jennifer apply the ointment to Star with the same gentleness Elizabeth had used. It was like seeing his young wife again. Jennifer, can I ask you a personal question? Of course, Uncle Robert. Do you have a boyfriend, a family of your own? No, she answered, blushing. I took care of my mother these last few years while she was sick. I didn't have time for relationships. And now? What do you plan to do with your life? I wanted... She hesitated. I wanted to learn more about the family, hear the stories my mother never told, and maybe help the animals here. It's the only thing I know how to do well." "Then stay," Robert said simply. "This ranch needs someone like you." "But I can't accept charity." "It's not charity," he interrupted. "It's work. I was thinking of hiring someone to help with the animals anyway. Dr. Anderson is getting older, and I don't understand natural remedies like you and Elizabeth did." Jennifer smiled, her first truly happy smile since arriving. "I'd love that, Uncle Robert." In the days that followed, Jennifer settled into the ranch's routine. She had an impressive knowledge of medicinal plants and natural treatments for animals. Neighbors began seeking her out to care for their sick pets. One afternoon, while Jennifer tended to an injured calf, an elegant woman in her 50s arrived at the ranch. "Robert," she called, "it's me, Helen Parker." Robert came out of the house, surprised. "Helen, it's been so long," he greeted her. "What brings you here?" Helen was a lawyer and had handled some of Elizabeth's legal matters before she passed. "I need to talk to you about something important," she said, noticing Jennifer in the corral. "It's about Elizabeth's will." "Will?" Robert said, confused. "Elizabeth didn't leave a will." "Yes, she did." Helen opened her folder. "She came to my office a few weeks before passing, said she had a feeling and wanted to settle some things." Robert felt a chill in his stomach. "What kind of things?" "She left specific instructions about the property. Half the ranch would go to you, as expected, but the other half—" "The other half what?" Robert asked impatiently. "Would go to her niece, Jennifer Johnson, daughter of Sarah Johnson." Robert nearly fell over. "What do you mean? Elizabeth didn't even know if Jennifer was alive." "She did," Helen said gently. "Elizabeth hired me to look for her family a few months before passing. We found out Sarah had married and had a daughter. Elizabeth really wanted to make amends but was afraid of being rejected. Why didn't she tell me anything?" Robert sat down on a chair on the porch. "She said she didn't want to worry you, and that if something happened to her, at least part of the family inheritance would return to where it belonged." "Did she know she was going to pass?" Robert asked, his voice breaking. "She'd been feeling some pain, went to the doctor, and found out she had a heart condition. The doctor said with care she could live many years, but Elizabeth was frightened." Robert remembered how Elizabeth had become more affectionate in recent months, more attentive to details, as if silently saying goodbye. "Does Jennifer know about this?" he asked. "Not yet," Helen replied. "I wanted to speak with you first." "Jennifer," Robert called. "Can you come here, please?" Jennifer approached, wiping her hands on a cloth. "This is Helen Parker, your aunt's lawyer," Robert introduced. "Nice to meet you," Jennifer greeted, confused. "Jennifer, I have some important news for you," Helen said. "Your Aunt Elizabeth left half of this property to you in her will." Jennifer turned pale. "That's impossible. She didn't even know me." "She did," Helen explained the investigation Elizabeth had done. "She really wanted to find you but passed before she could gather the courage." Jennifer sat on the porch floor, clearly in shock. "She knew about me," she murmured. "She knew you existed, that you took care of your mother, that you'd inherited the family gift with animals." Helen read from her notes. "She was very proud of you." "But why would she leave the property to me?" Jennifer asked, looking at Robert. "I'm a stranger." "You're not a stranger," Robert said firmly. "You're family." And apparently Elizabeth wanted part of the family inheritance to return to the Johnson women's line. "Besides," Helen continued, "she left a letter for you." Helen took out a sealed envelope from her folder. Jennifer took it with trembling hands. "Can I read it now?" "Of course, dear." Jennifer carefully opened the envelope. The letter was handwritten in Elizabeth's delicate script. "My dear niece Jennifer, if you're reading this letter, it means I passed before finding the courage to reach out. Forgive me for that. I learned of your existence a few months ago and was overjoyed to know my sister Sarah had a daughter. I heard you care for your mother with great love and that you inherited our family's gift with animals. All these years, I carried in my heart the pain of losing my family because of love. I don't regret choosing Robert. He's the most honorable man I know, but I suffered deeply for losing you. I know it's too late to ask for forgiveness, but I hope you can understand that a young woman in love sometimes makes decisions that hurt those she loves. This ranch belonged to our family for generations. Our grandparents planted these trees, raised animals on this land. It's only fair that part of it returns to you, who carries the blood and knowledge of the Johnson women. Take good care of Robert. He's a good man, but very lonely. Teach him the secrets our grandmother taught us. Continue the healing legacy our family has always had. And if one day you find your mother, Sarah, tell her I loved her until the last day of my life. That not a single day passed without me thinking of her. And that I hope one day we can meet again in a place where there's no more pain or separation. With all my love, your Aunt Elizabeth. Jennifer cried so much she couldn't speak anymore. Robert hugged her, and he was crying too. She was always stubborn but had a heart bigger than the world, he murmured. I can't accept the inheritance, Jennifer said between tears. This property is yours, Uncle Robert. It's ours, Robert corrected. Elizabeth knew what she was doing. She wanted the family to be reunited. Helen kept the papers. I'll take care of all the legal documentation. The property will be in both your names, as Elizabeth wished. After Helen left, Robert and Jennifer sat on the porch watching the sunset. Uncle Robert, can I ask you something? Jennifer said. Of course. What was my aunt like? I mean, as a person. Robert smiled, his eyes lighting up with memories. Elizabeth was special. She had her own light. She was brave, determined, but also very sweet. She took care of every injured animal that showed up here, just like you're doing. Were you happy? Very happy, Robert said without hesitation. 25 years of pure joy in our marriage. Her only regret was not being able to have children, and now I understand part of that sadness was being away from family. Did you try to have children? We tried very hard. We did several treatments, but it didn't work. Elizabeth always said maybe God had other plans for us. Maybe the plans were me, Jennifer said timidly. Robert looked at her fondly. Maybe they were. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. In the following weeks, Jennifer settled completely into the ranch. She had a natural talent, not just for caring for animals, but also for managing the property. She organized the home remedies, created a system to track each animal's health, and even started teaching her techniques to other farmers in the area. One day, while Robert was in town handling bank matters, a well-dressed young man around 30 arrived at the ranch driving an expensive car. Good afternoon, he greeted Jennifer. I'm looking for Mr. Robert Mitchell. He went to town, but he'll be back soon, Jennifer replied. Can I help with something? I'm Richard Brooks, from Brooks & Associates Realty. He introduced himself. I'm here to make a purchase offer for this property. Jennifer was confused. Purchase? But the property isn't for sale. Not yet, Richard smiled in a way Jennifer found unpleasant. But I know Mr. Robert has been having financial difficulties. I'm prepared to make a very generous offer. What financial difficulties? Jennifer asked, concerned. Well, everyone knows that since his wife died, the ranch hasn't been as profitable. He's alone, getting older, can't manage everything. Richard gestured. It would be much better for him to sell and retire in town. Who said he's alone? Jennifer crossed her arms. Well, he has no family, no children. Richard stopped when he saw Jennifer's expression. Are you related to him? I'm his wife's niece, and I can guarantee he's not alone or interested in selling anything. Richard changed tactics. Look, miss, it's nothing personal, just business. This area is developing fast, has potential for subdivisions, gated communities. We can pay 3 times what the property is worth today. And destroy a ranch that's been here for generations to build houses? Jennifer was outraged. It's progress, miss. No use clinging to the past. You can leave, Jennifer said firmly. This property will never be sold. Richard laughed. You can't speak for Mr. Mitchell. When he hears how much money he could make. How much money could I make from what? Robert appeared coming down the road. Mr. Mitchell. Richard immediately changed his tone. I'm Richard Brooks from Brooks & Associates. I came to make an offer you can't refuse for your property. Robert looked at Jennifer, who frowned. "Not interested," Robert said simply. "But you haven't even heard the offer," Richard insisted. "I'm talking over $2 million. Robert nearly choked. That was serious money. "What do you want this land for?" he asked. "Urban development. This area will be the future of the city," Richard said excitedly, thinking he'd piqued Robert's interest. "And what happens to the animals? To the trees my father-in-law planted? To this family's history?" Robert asked. "Well, that would be secondary. The important thing is the region's economic growth." "Then I'm not interested," Robert said firmly. "This land isn't just property. It's a home, it's history, it's a legacy. Mr. Mitchell, you're passing up the opportunity of a lifetime." Richard was growing irritated. "I'm seizing the opportunity of my life." Robert looked at Jennifer. "I'm learning some things don't have a price." Richard left, clearly frustrated, but promising to return with an even better offer. $2 million, Robert murmured when they were alone. "That's a lot of money." "Do you regret refusing?" Jennifer asked, worried. "Regret?" Robert laughed. "Jennifer, if I sold this land, I'd be selling Elizabeth's memory, your family's history, the future she imagined for us. No amount of money could ever pay for that." Jennifer hugged him. "Thank you, Uncle Robert. Don't mention it, sweetheart. This land is as much yours as mine." But Richard's visit was just the beginning. In the following days, other agents showed up, all with tempting offers. Robert began to suspect there was more to this sudden interest. "Jennifer, don't you think it's strange how many people want to buy our land?" he asked during dinner. "I do. And I noticed they always mention urban development, subdivisions. It's like they know something we don't." The next day, Robert decided to investigate at City Hall. He discovered plans for a massive shopping center in the area, which would skyrocket the value of all nearby properties. "So our land could be worth way more than they're offering?" Jennifer asked when he told her. "Way more," Robert confirmed, "but that's not what worries me." "What does?" "If they build that mall, it'll destroy the whole rural way of life here. Neighbors will sell their land, they'll build houses and more houses. In a few years, nothing will be left of the community that's been here for decades." Jennifer grew thoughtful. "Maybe we can do something to stop it." "Like what?" "I don't know yet, but Aunt Margaret wouldn't have left us this land for no reason. Maybe she knew someday we'd need to protect it." That night, Jennifer had an idea. She had noticed that many neighbors had sick or injured animals, but couldn't afford a private veterinarian. And Dr. William, though competent, was overwhelmed trying to serve the entire region. "Uncle Robert, what if we turned part of our property into a natural healing center for animals?" she suggested over breakfast. "How do you mean?" "A place where people from the area could bring their animals for treatment with herbs and natural remedies. We'd charge very little, just enough to keep the place running." Robert grew excited about the idea. It would give the property a social purpose. It'd be harder to tear down a place that serves the community. "Exactly, and we'd be honoring the Johnson family legacy. They always cared for injured animals." They began planning the project. They converted one of the barns into a rustic but well-equipped clinic. Jennifer catalogued all the medicinal plants in the area and created a dedicated herb garden for veterinary treatments. Word spread quickly. Within weeks, people came from neighboring towns seeking Jennifer's treatments. She didn't just heal the animals, she taught owners how to prevent illnesses and make basic home remedies. Dr. William was delighted by the project and offered to consult on the more serious cases. "Jennifer, you're doing incredible work," he said during one of his visits. "I've never seen animals recover so well with natural treatments. It's my grandmother's and mother's knowledge," Jennifer replied humbly. "I'm just carrying it on." "No, it's more than that," Dr. William insisted. "You have a special gift. The animals trust you in a way I rarely see." One afternoon, as Jennifer treated a dog with an infected wound, an elderly woman with white hair arrived at the clinic, dressed in simple but well-kept clothes. "Excuse me," she said timidly. "I'd like to speak with the young lady who cares for the animals." "That's me," Jennifer smiled. "How can I help?" "My name is Catherine Johnson. I lived here many years ago but moved to the city when I married. Now I've returned to care for my sick mother." "Can I help with one of your animals?" "Actually, Catherine hesitated. I came because I heard you're from the Johnson family. Jennifer stopped what she was doing. You knew my family? I knew your grandmother, Margaret, and your mother, Sarah. We were childhood friends. Jennifer's heart raced. Do you know what happened to them? Why they left? Yes, my dear, and I came because I believe you have the right to know the full truth. Robert, who had been organizing supplies nearby, approached. Mrs. Johnson, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Robert, Elizabeth's husband. Ah, the famous Robert, Catherine smiled. Elizabeth spoke of you often when we were young. You were friends with Elizabeth too? The four of us were inseparable. Me, Elizabeth, Sarah, and one more cousin of theirs, Francis. We were quite the troublemakers around here. What cousin? Jennifer asked. My mother never mentioned a cousin, Francis. Catherine sighed. It's a complicated story, dear. Would you like to sit? It'll take a while to tell everything. They settled on the clinic porch, and Catherine began to reminisce. The Johnson family was always very close, but also very traditional. When Elizabeth fell in love with Robert, the family was divided. Some supported it, others were against it. And my mother? Jennifer asked. Sarah was the youngest, only 16 at the time. She admired Elizabeth and wanted to support her sister, but she was pressured by her parents and uncles to oppose the marriage. And cousin Francis? Francis was in love with Robert, Catherine said, watching the shock cross their faces. She was their cousin, the daughter of their father's older brother. When she found out that Elizabeth and Robert were dating, she became furious and started turning the family against their relationship. Robert turned pale. I had no idea she liked me. To me, she was just Elizabeth's cousin. It was a secret crush, Catherine explained. Frances never had the courage to confess her feelings, but when she saw she was losing Robert to Elizabeth, she did everything to tear you apart. Was she the one who convinced the family to reject the marriage? Jennifer asked. She planted the seeds of discord, said Robert wasn't trustworthy, that he'd abandon Elizabeth, that the family would be humiliated. How cruel, Robert murmured. The worst part is that Sarah, being so young, believed everything Francis said. When Elizabeth decided to marry him anyway, Sarah felt betrayed. She thought her sister was choosing a man who would hurt her. That's why my mother never tried to reconnect, Jennifer began to understand. She thought she'd tried to protect her sister and was ignored. Exactly. And Elizabeth, on her end, believed the family, including Sarah, had rejected her out of pride and prejudice. And Frances, what happened to her? Robert asked. She married a farmer from another region a few years later, but she never got over the anger of losing Robert. Whenever someone mentioned Elizabeth, she'd speak ill of her, fueling the gossip. How sad, Jennifer said. Two sisters who loved each other were torn apart because of a third person's jealousy. Pride played its part too, Catherine admitted. Both Elizabeth and Sarah were stubborn. Neither wanted to swallow their pride and make the first move toward reconciliation. And my grandmother Margaret? Jennifer asked. Your grandmother suffered deeply over her daughter's separation. She secretly supported Elizabeth, but couldn't openly oppose her husband and the rest of the family. When Sarah decided to leave the area, Margaret went with her so she wouldn't lose another daughter. What a heartbreaking story, Robert said, shaking his head. But now you're together again, Catherine smiled. The Johnson family is reuniting through Jennifer. Do you know where cousin Frances is now? Jennifer asked. I do. She was widowed a few years ago and returned to the area. Lives on a small farm about 12 miles from here. Robert and Jennifer exchanged glances. Do you think we should talk to her? Jennifer asked. I think we should, Robert replied. Maybe it's time to clear the air and heal the wounds of the past. Just be careful, Catherine warned. Frances has always held grudges. I don't know how she'll react. The next day, Robert and Jennifer went to visit Frances. The small farm was modest but well kept, with a few cows and chickens. A woman in her 60s, her graying hair tied in a bun, was milking a cow when they arrived. Frances Johnson? Robert asked. The woman turned and, recognizing Robert, nearly dropped the milk bucket. Robert Mitchell, she said coldly. What do you want here? We came to talk, he replied calmly. This is Jennifer, Elizabeth's niece. Francis stared at Jennifer with a strange expression. Sarah's daughter? Yes, Mom. What do you want from me? Francis asked, clearly defensive. We want to understand what really happened in the past, Jennifer said. Mrs. Catherine told us some things. Catherine's always been a gossip, Francis muttered. What did she say? That you were in love with me and turned the family against my marriage to Elizabeth, Robert said bluntly. Francis flushed with anger. Catherine had no right to say that. So it's true? Jennifer asked. Francis glared at them for a few seconds, then let out a heavy sigh. Come in, she said, pointing to the porch of the house. Since you've come all this way, I'll tell you my side of the story. They sat in wicker chairs on the simple porch. Francis served black coffee and began to speak. It's true that I had feelings for Robert, she admitted. I've liked him since we were teenagers, but he never looked at me. He only had eyes for his cousin Elizabeth. Francis, I had no idea, Robert began. Of course you didn't, she interrupted. You were completely blind to anything that wasn't Elizabeth. She was the pretty one, the smart one, the charming one. I was always the ugly country cousin. You're not ugly, Jennifer said kindly. In his eyes I was, Francis pointed at Robert, and when I found out they were getting married, I lost my mind. I did things I still regret to this day. What kind of things? Robert asked. I turned your uncles against the marriage. I made up stories about your family, about your intentions. I said you only wanted to marry Elizabeth for the Johnson family's land. But that wasn't true, Robert said. I knew it wasn't, Francis admitted, ashamed, but I was so angry, so jealous. I wanted to destroy your happiness because I couldn't be happy myself. And you convinced my mother too, Jennifer asked. Sarah was very young, very impressionable. She believed everything I said because she thought I was trying to protect Elizabeth. Francis lowered her head. I manipulated a teenager to get what I wanted. And you succeeded, Robert said bitterly. You tore the family apart and caused years of suffering for everyone. I didn't, Francis corrected him. You still got married, and you were happy. Very happy. I was the one left bitter and alone for decades. You did get married, Jennifer reminded her. I married a man I didn't love, trying to forget Robert. It was an unhappy marriage. We had no children. He drank too much. We fought constantly. Francis wiped away a tear. I wasted my whole life over a love that was never returned. Francis, Robert said more gently, I'm truly sorry you suffered, but what you did caused a lot of pain too. I know, she replied. Not a day goes by that I don't think about it, especially after I learned Elizabeth had passed. You knew? Jennifer asked. I did. And I cried as if I'd lost a sister, because deep down, that's what Elizabeth was to me. A sister I betrayed out of jealousy and spite. They sat in silence for a few minutes. What do you want us to do with this information? Jennifer finally asked. Nothing, Francis answered. I just wanted you to know I regret it, that if I could go back, I'd do everything differently. What about my mother? Jennifer pressed. Did you ever try to make things right with her? I did. A few years ago, when I heard Sarah had returned to the area to care for her sick mother, I went to see her. And what happened? She refused to see me. Said I'd destroyed her family and never wanted to speak to me again. My mother came back here. Jennifer was surprised. When? About 5 years ago. Margaret was very ill, and Sarah came to take care of her until the end, Francis explained. Jennifer felt the world spin. My grandmother died 5 years ago. My mother told me it was 10 years ago. No, dear. Margaret passed 5 years ago. I went to the funeral. Sarah was there, but she avoided me. That means... Jennifer did the math. My mother was here when Aunt Elizabeth was still alive. She was, Francis confirmed. In fact, they saw each other a few times. Robert nearly fell out of his chair. What do you mean they saw each other? Sarah would often visit her mother's grave at the cemetery. Elizabeth also went to the cemetery to visit her parents' grave. Several people told me they saw each other there a few times. And what happened? Jennifer asked, her heart racing. At first, they avoided each other. Each went at different times. But then they started meeting on purpose. They would talk in the cemetery, crying together. Elizabeth never told me anything about this, Robert said, shocked. Sarah didn't tell me either, Jennifer murmured. They reconciled in the last few months before Elizabeth passed, Francis continued. Sarah came to me after Elizabeth's funeral crying so much. She said she had lost her sister twice, once to pride and again to death. Jennifer began to cry. Why did my mother never tell me this? Why did she lie about when my grandmother died? Maybe to protect you, Francis suggested. Sarah always carried so much guilt for siding with the family against Elizabeth. Maybe she didn't want you to know she had the chance to reconcile with her sister, but wasted precious time because of pride. Or maybe, Robert said thoughtfully, she wanted you to find out on your own when the time was right. Maybe that's why you felt that unexplained need to come looking for your aunt. Do you think my mother knew she was going to pass? Jennifer asked. It's possible, Francis replied. Sarah was very sick in her last months. Maybe she knew it was time for you to learn the truth about the family. Robert took Jennifer's hand. What matters is that you're here now, and you're honoring the memory of both your mother and Elizabeth. And me? Francis asked timidly. Can you forgive me? Jennifer looked at her for a long moment. Francis, you did wrong. You caused a lot of pain, but you also suffered the consequences of your actions, and you're truly sorry. I am, Francis confirmed. Then I forgive you, Jennifer said. I can't speak for my mother or Aunt Elizabeth, but for myself, I forgive you. And so do I, Robert added. Life is too short to hold grudges. Francis cried with relief. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving me a chance to apologize. Francis, Jennifer said, would you like to help honor the Johnson family's memory? How? We're creating a natural healing center for animals on the ranch. Do you have knowledge of medicinal plants? I do. I learned from Margaret when I was young. Then come help us. Let's work together to keep the family's legacy alive. Francis was surprised. You'd accept me after everything I did? Everyone deserves a second chance, Robert said. And Elizabeth always believed in the power of forgiveness. In the following months, Francis became a constant presence on the ranch. She had impressive knowledge of medicinal herbs and natural healing techniques. Working with Jennifer, they developed even more effective treatments. The Natural Veterinary Clinic became famous in the area. People came from distant towns seeking treatments from the Johnson Healers, as Jennifer and Francis began to be called. Dr. William was so impressed with the results that he started referring patients to them, especially in cases where traditional medicine wasn't working. You're doing work that goes far beyond healing animals, he said during one of his visits. You're healing the community, preserving traditions, creating hope. It's what Aunt Elizabeth would have wanted, Jennifer replied. The clinic's success had an unexpected consequence. The pressure to sell the property dropped dramatically. Richard and other realtors stopped showing up when they realized the ranch had become a thriving and socially important business. They can no longer argue that the property is abandoned or unproductive, Robert explained to Jennifer. An animal health center is considered for public use. Does that mean we've protected the land? Jennifer asked. For now, yes. But the best part is, we did it by honoring the family's memory, not fighting against it. One morning, while Jennifer prepared medications in the makeshift lab, an official car from City Hall arrived at the ranch. A man in a suit stepped out, accompanied by Richard, the broker who had tried to buy the property. Mr. Robert Mitchell, the man introduced himself. I'm Michael Roberts, the Urban Development Secretary for City Hall. I need to speak with you about an important matter. Of course, Robert replied, wary. What is this about? You may know that a shopping center is planned for this area. I've heard, yes. What you may not know is that your property is located right at the center of the development zone. This means it must be acquired for the project to proceed. Robert felt his blood run cold. Acquired? It's a project of public interest, the secretary explained. The shopping center will create thousands of jobs and significantly boost the city's revenue. And if I don't want to sell? Robert asked. Unfortunately, in cases of public interest acquisition, The owner has no choice, but City Hall is willing to pay a fair price for the property. Richard smiled triumphantly. I tried to settle this amicably, Mr. Mitchell. Now there's no alternative. Jennifer, who had been listening from the clinic door, stepped forward. Excuse me, she interrupted. I'd like to know something. Did you conduct environmental and social impact studies before deciding on this acquisition? The secretary seemed surprised by the question. Well, the studies are being conducted. Are they being conducted or have they been completed? Jennifer pressed. They're in progress, he admitted. Then how can you claim the project is of public interest without completing the impact studies? Jennifer asked. Look, miss, these technical matters are complicated. No, they're not, Jennifer cut in. I studied environmental law in college before dedicating myself to veterinary care. And I know no acquisition can be made without full impact studies. Robert looked at Jennifer with pride. She had never mentioned having a higher education before. Besides, Jennifer continued, this property houses an animal health center that serves the entire region. Acquiring it would deprive the community of an essential service. The shopping center is also an essential service, Richard argued. A shopping center is commerce, not an essential service, Jennifer countered. Essential services are healthcare, education, safety. What we do here is animal healthcare, which is vital for the region's rural economy. The secretary looked visibly uncomfortable. Well, we'll review the situation further, but the shopping center is a priority for City Hall. And property owners' rights are also a priority under federal law, Jennifer replied. You can study all you want, but until you prove the shopping center is truly of public interest and that there are no alternative locations, this property cannot be acquired. After they left, Robert hugged Jennifer. Where did you learn all that? In law school before I dedicated myself to natural veterinary care, she explained. I've always been interested in environmental law and rural property rights. Why didn't you ever mention you had a law degree? Because I didn't want you to think I was some opportunist who came here interested in money or property. I wanted you to know that my interest was genuine in getting to know the family and honoring Aunt Elizabeth's memory. Robert shook his head, impressed. Elizabeth would be so proud of you. Do you think we can stop the expropriation? With you on our side, I'm sure we can. In the following days, Jennifer carefully studied all the legislation on expropriations and environmental impact. She discovered several irregularities in the process being conducted by City Hall. Uncle Robert, they're trying to bypass several laws, she explained. The project doesn't have an environmental license, no public hearing was held, and they didn't even check if there are properties serving a social function in the area. Does our property serve a social function? Robert asked. Of course it does. We provide animal healthcare services for the entire rural community. That's a clear and defined social function. Jennifer prepared a full dossier on the irregularities and filed a complaint with the district attorney's office, exposing the flaws in the expropriation process. The prosecutor who received the complaint took an interest in the case and opened an official investigation. Within weeks, the shopping mall project was suspended until all irregularities were resolved. Richard showed up at the ranch furious. You have no idea who you're messing with, he shouted. This mall is important to very powerful people. And this property is important to our community, Jennifer replied calmly. If those powerful people wanted to build the mall, they should have followed the law. You'll regret this, Richard threatened before leaving. But the threats didn't intimidate Robert or Jennifer. Instead, they doubled their efforts to strengthen the property's social purpose. They created an environmental education program for rural school children, teaching them about animal care and nature preservation. Francis volunteered to give lessons on medicinal plants and sustainable farming. Now our property isn't just an animal healing center, Jennifer explained to Dr. William. It's also an environmental education hub. It'll be much harder to argue that expropriating this serves the public interest. The vet smiled. You're smarter than I thought. A few months later, the district attorney's investigation uncovered a corruption scheme involving the mall's approval. Several City Hall employees were removed, including the urban development secretary. The project was permanently cancelled, and the area returned to its rural roots. We did it, Robert said, hugging Jennifer on the porch as they watched the sunset. We did, she agreed. and in a way that honors everything Aunt Elizabeth believed in. She always said the land doesn't belong to us, we belong to the land, Robert recalled, and that our duty is to care for it for future generations. Now I understand why she left half the property to me, Jennifer said. She knew one day I'd need to protect it. And she knew you had the tools to do it, Robert added. A year later, the Natural Veterinary Clinic had become a regional model. Jennifer and Francis treated hundreds of animals each month, and the educational program welcomed children from various schools. Robert, who'd found new purpose in life, handled administrative duties and helped maintain the property. Gradually, the grief over losing Elizabeth was replaced by the joy of seeing her legacy honored. One afternoon, while organizing medications in the lab, Francis asked a question that surprised Jennifer. "Jennifer, have you ever thought about getting married, starting your own family?" "I have," Jennifer replied, "but I haven't met the right person yet." "And what kind of person would be right for you?" "Someone who shares the same values, who loves animals, respects nature, understands the importance of preserving traditions," Jennifer thought for a moment. "Someone who wants to build something lasting, not just live for the moment." "Those qualities are rare these days," Francis observed. "That's why I haven't found anyone yet," Jennifer laughed. But fate had a surprise in store for her. One morning, a young veterinarian in his 30s with brown hair and kind eyes arrived at the clinic with an injured horse. "Good morning," he introduced himself. "I'm Matthew Davis, the veterinarian from the municipal clinic in the neighboring town. I brought this horse to you because I've heard about the natural treatments you do here." "Of course," Jennifer replied, examining the animal. "What kind of injury does he have?" "It's an infection that isn't responding to conventional antibiotics. The owner is desperate. This horse is a rodeo champion." "Let's see what we can do," Jennifer said, already preparing a special ointment. Matthew watched closely as she worked, impressed by her technique and the gentleness of her movements. "Where did you learn these techniques?" he asked. "It's knowledge passed down through generations in my family," Jennifer explained. "My grandmother taught my mother, who taught me." "And does it really work?" "You'll see," Jennifer smiled. "Bring the horse back in 3 days." 3 days later, Matthew returned with the horse completely recovered. "It's unbelievable," he exclaimed. "The infection is completely gone, and the wound is healing perfectly." "Nature has its own antibiotics," Jennifer explained. "We just need to know how to use them." "Could you teach me some of these techniques?" Matthew asked. "It would be really useful in my veterinary practice." "Of course," Jennifer agreed. "But it will take time. It's complex knowledge." "I have time," Matthew smiled. And so began a friendship that little by little turned into something more. Matthew spent weekends at the ranch, learning natural medicine techniques from Jennifer and Francis. Robert watched the development of their relationship with joy. "He's a good man," he said to Jennifer one evening, "and he's clearly in love with you." "And I with him," Jennifer admitted, blushing. "But I'm afraid of getting my hopes up." "Why?" "He's from the city, with an established career there, and I belong to this place. My family, my work, my life. It's all here." "Have you asked him what he thinks about that?" "I haven't had the courage." "Then ask," Robert suggested. "You might be surprised by his answer." The following weekend, Jennifer finally found the courage to bring it up with Matthew. "Matthew, I need to ask you something," she said, as they walked through the pasture at dusk. "Ask away." "What are your life plans? I mean, do you intend to keep working in the city forever?" "Actually," Matthew stopped walking and looked at her. "I've been thinking about changing my plans." "How so?" "Jennifer, in these months working with you, I've learned more about veterinary medicine than in years of school, and I've discovered that my true passion is natural medicine for animals." "And what does that mean?" "It means I'm thinking of leaving my job in the city and opening a rural clinic, here in the area, working in partnership with you." Jennifer's heart raced. "You'd do that?" "I'd do it for myself," Matthew said, taking her hands, "and I'd do it for you, because I've fallen in love not just with your work, but with you as a person." "Matthew, Jennifer, I love you," he said simply, "and I want to build a life with you, caring for animals, preserving traditions, honoring your family's legacy." "I love you too," Jennifer replied, her eyes filled with happy tears. They kissed there in the pasture as the sun set behind the mountains, with the horses grazing peacefully around them. 6 months later, Jennifer and Matthew married in a simple ceremony in the ranch's garden. Dr. William was the best man, Mrs. Dorothy was the matron of honor, and Frances crafted the rings from gold she had saved from her family's inheritance. Robert wept with emotion when he saw Jennifer wearing the wedding dress that had once belonged to Elizabeth. "She would be so happy," he murmured to Frances. "She is happy," Frances corrected. "I'm sure she is." The celebration took place right on the ranch, with country music and homemade food prepared by the women of the community. All the neighbors were there, along with the owners of animals that had been treated at the clinic. During the party, Robert asked for everyone's attention to make a speech. "Friends," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "2 years ago, I was a lonely man, bitter from the loss of my beloved wife. I thought my life had ended with hers. But then a young stranger arrived here, stepping into my barn to care for an injured horse. And with that simple act, she brought life back to this home, to this land, to this family." Jennifer didn't just honor Elizabeth's memory. She carried on the legacy of love and care that has always defined the women of the Johnson family. And today, seeing her marry Matthew, a young man who shares the same values and passion for caring for animals, I know this legacy will continue for many generations. May you be as happy as Elizabeth and I were. May you build a family rooted in love, respect, and devotion to others. Robert raised his glass. "Cheers, cheers," everyone toasted. After the party, when the guests had left and the newlyweds were on their honeymoon, a week at a country inn in the mountains, Robert sat alone on the porch gazing at the stars. Frances approached and sat beside him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I'm thinking life is strange," Robert replied. "Sometimes we lose people we love and believe we'll never be happy again. But then life surprises us, bringing new people, new joys." "Do you miss Elizabeth?" "Every day," Robert admitted. "But it's no longer a painful longing, it's a tender memory, full of gratitude for the happy years we shared." "And how do you feel about Jennifer?" "A father's love," Robert smiled. "It's as if she's the daughter Elizabeth and I never had. But fate sent her when we needed her most." "And what about me?" Frances asked timidly. "Have you truly forgiven me?" Robert looked at her warmly. "Frances, you've become part of our family. You helped build all of this." He gestured to the property. "You've honored Elizabeth's memory better than many who claimed to love her. Thank you for giving me that chance. Thank you for taking it." A year after the wedding, Jennifer and Matthew announced they were expecting a baby. The news filled the ranch with joy. "It's a girl," Jennifer told Robert, "and we want to name her Elizabeth Sarah after my aunt and my mother." Robert cried with emotion. "They would be so honored." "And we want you to be her grandfather," Matthew added. "She'll grow up here, learning to care for animals, knowing the family's traditions." "It would be my pleasure," Robert replied. Little Elizabeth Sarah was born on a spring morning with the signature green eyes of the Johnson family and a smile that lit up her face. "She looks just like Aunt Elizabeth when she was a baby," Frances observed, cradling the child in her arms. "And she'll learn all the family's secrets," Jennifer said. "She'll be the next generation of Johnson healers. 5 years passed." The young Elizabeth Sarah grew up surrounded by animals, learning from an early age to respect and care for them. The Natural Veterinary Clinic became a national reference, attracting students and veterinarians from across the country who came to learn traditional techniques. Robert, now 70 years old, remained active and happy, caring for his granddaughter as if she were his own daughter. Frances became the girl's adoptive grandmother, teaching her old songs and family stories. Matthew developed innovative techniques that combined modern veterinary medicine with natural treatments, publishing scientific articles that gained international recognition. And Jennifer, now 30, had become one of the most respected healers in the region, keeping alive the legacy of knowledge passed down through generations of the Johnson family. One afternoon, as she watched her daughter playing in the pasture with the horses, Jennifer reflected on how her life had changed since that morning when she decided to care for a stranger's injured horse. "What are you thinking about?" Matthew asked, embracing her from behind. "I'm thinking Aunt Elizabeth was right when she wrote in the letter that I carried the blood and knowledge of the Johnson women," Jennifer replied. "She knew I would continue the family legacy." "And you're doing it beautifully." "Not just me," Jennifer corrected. "Us. You, me, Uncle Robert, Francis, and now our daughter. We're all part of this legacy." "And Elizabeth Sarah will teach it to her children," Matthew added. "And her children will teach it to their grandchildren," Jennifer smiled. "The knowledge will stay alive." That night, after Elizabeth Sarah had fallen asleep, the whole family gathered on the porch for the ritual they had created, telling stories about their ancestors and giving thanks for the blessings they had received. "Today I want to give thanks," Robert began, "for the second chance life gave me, for meeting Jennifer, for gaining a wonderful son-in-law, for having a beautiful granddaughter, and for discovering that family isn't just blood, it's also choice and love. I want to give thanks," Francis said, "for the forgiveness I received and the chance to make up for past mistakes, for becoming a grandmother at 65, and for learning that it's never too late to start over." "I want to give thanks," Matthew spoke, "for finding not just the love of my life, but a family that welcomed me and taught me the true meaning of caring for others. And I," Jennifer concluded, "want to give thanks for having the courage to follow my heart and seek out the family I never knew, for discovering that love has no limits of time or space, and that when we do good, it always comes back to us." They fell silent, listening to the sounds of the night, crickets chirping, horses softly neighing, wind rustling through the trees. "Aunt Elizabeth would be proud," Jennifer murmured. "She is proud," Robert corrected, gazing at the stars. "I'm sure of it." And so the ranch that was almost sold to make way for a shopping center became a symbol of resilience, tradition, and family love. The Natural Veterinary Clinic continued to grow, helping thousands of animals and preserving ancestral knowledge. The young Elizabeth Sarah grew up strong and healthy, showing early on the same family gift for healing injured animals. By the age of 5, she already knew how to prepare simple ointments and could calm any frightened creature just with her presence. And when people asked Jennifer what the secret of the Johnson family's success was, she always gave the same answer. "The secret is to love without expecting anything in return, to care for what's wounded, protect what's threatened, and never forget that we're part of something bigger than ourselves." The story of the young woman who entered the barn to care for an injured horse became a legend in the region. People would tell their children how a simple act of compassion can change entire lives and reunite families that seemed lost forever. And with every animal healed, every child taught, every tradition preserved, the legacy of the Johnson women lived on, proving that true love never dies, it only transforms and multiplies through the generations. The end of the story. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this tale of reunion and healing? Do you believe Jennifer made the right choices in preserving her family's traditions? Share in the comments which part moved you the most, and if you've ever experienced a family reunion yourself. Your opinion means so much to us. Don't forget to like this video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories that touch the soul.